Hi everyone, it's Miriam Ortiz y Pino here with More Than Organized with another More Than Organized Monday. Today I wanted to talk about, give you an overview of the whole organizing process. I actually got a funny phone call from my brother yesterday who said, I've just dumped out a bunch of hodgepodge from 5 different drawers and I put it into piles. Now what do I do? And it made me realize that I talk a lot about theory and then I sometimes get very specific about something, but I haven't given an overall overview of the entire organizing process. So I thought it would be a good idea to do that and then run a series over the next few weeks where I go more in depth into each of the steps, which are flexible and overlap and loop back on each other. So I want to give, the overview of the process, and then we'll go into each one a little more in depth over the next few weeks. How about that? All right. So again, you can visit morethanorganized.net and get a whole bunch of free resources. They're all available there. There's stuff on paper sorting. There's stuff on decision making. There's stuff on how to get unstuck and stay motivated. So all the kind of more, there's a bunch of how-to and a bunch of motivation stuff on there. So be sure to check out morethanorganized.net. All right, so the overview of how to get organized. The first step, and I've talked about this before, is you have to know why you're getting organized. Otherwise, you will not stay motivated and you won't come up with the best solution, because getting organized in a vacuum never really works. That's when the rearranging starts, when it's just messy and you want it cleaned up. But knowing why you want it cleaned up and how you're going to use the things in that space is going to help you stay motivated and keep going, and gives you direction so you don't spin off and do things wrong and then have to redo them. It gives you the opportunity to figure out how you're going to best use the space and the stuff in it. So take a little bit of time. It's kind of the pre-planning thing, is what do you want your space to do for you? What do you want the things in your life to do for you? What are you trying to accomplish? Your desired outcome, the why you are doing it, okay? Step 2 is to take a little bit of time to do the more specific planning. Plan some time blocks at regular scheduled intervals for when you're going to do the organizing work. Plan which order of areas in your house you're going to work on. It doesn't really matter where you start, but knowing why you're doing it might give indication of where to start. Or I often give people the advice to start either where you spend the most amount of time, so your kitchen, or you can find the most sanctuary, so it'll be a calm, peaceful place for you to recuperate between other organizing sessions, so maybe the master bedroom. So those are the 2 places I tend to start. Which way is bothering you more? Do you want to get more use, or do you need more relaxing? It'll help you keep motivated throughout the whole process. So you really just want to plan a little bit, the time, where you're going to start, and then a few of the things you might need to make the process a little bit easier. It is not about containers at this point at all. It is trash bags, gloves, a mask if it's a particularly messy area, some idea of where you might donate things, maybe a car, or a plan of taking the things out of the house as you work through it. How long you're going to have your session be, how small of an area within the space you're going to work on, and all that depends on the time you're able to set aside. So it doesn't matter as much how much time you set aside, but that you set aside time regularly for working on this project of getting organized, whether it's just one space or your whole house, okay? Step 3 is to actually start. So on the day and time you have picked to actually start this process, you go to that space and you start working. And you plan, depending on how much time you have, am I going to do just the bookshelf to the left of the doorway? Or am I going to do the whole room today? Or, pick your amount of space. The limiter of how much time and effort you're going to put into it will help you determine how to process the room. I always start with clearing enough floor space to do the work. So no matter what the area is, you need enough room to work and maneuver and not trip over the stuff you're moving around. So I always start with the center, create enough floor space, and then I go methodically around the room clockwise from left of the door around to the right. Very rarely do I go right to left, and that would entirely depend on what is in the room and what the function of the room is and what you're trying to accomplish in that room. So I'll leave that up to you, but know that there's a plan of attack. You start, and the first thing you do is sort. Like things together, okay? Sorting is all about like things together. Once you have the piles, like my brother did yesterday, he took the piles of hodgepodge, which by that he means a bunch of different stuff all in the same drawer, is what he was working on. And he sorted it into like things. So he ended up with a pile of batteries, a pile of office supplies, a pile of arts and crafts, and a pile of cords for charging the various things around the house. So those were the things he sorted. So sorting is actually putting like things together. The next stage is to actually purge your items. So you may, as you're sorting into the piles, have already done a little bit of purging. And by purging, I mean deciding you're not going to keep it. So whether it's recycle, trash, donate, sell, whatever, it's the stuff you're deciding against keeping. That way you're left with only what you're going to keep. But the second part of the sorting and purging is, now that you have the various piles of like things together, you can evaluate them against each other. So you can see which batteries work, which don't. Do you have batteries for weird appliances that you no longer have? You still have a weird lingering 9-volt battery hanging around? I don't know, but that's when you have a chance to evaluate like things together and decide which ones are the best of the best to keep. All right, so then you want to keep moving. And this is where some people go wrong. You don't want to keep sorting and purging through the whole house, just in a small area at a time, so that you can keep moving forward and start using and start creating the systems. But once you know what to keep, you're going to then put them away. So this is the other place my brother went a little bit off track yesterday. He called to ask what containers he should use to keep the piles. And I said, well, first of all, you got to purge the piles, and then you need to determine what space you think is going to be best for them to be kept. And if you have a pile and it's already sorted and you're worried about putting it in containers, I suggest using Ziploc baggies at this point, just to keep things kind of neat, already completed, and you may not know that final resting place for a little while, and you may need to move it back and forth. If you already have some sort of container, go ahead and put it back in the container, but think about it in terms of, you want to be able to have something to move around. So for instance, when I did my gift cards or my greeting cards and things, I loved this little box. I had gotten a set of stationery in here and I just loved it. So I added all my loose cards back into this box, and this is now my stationery box. So that goes back on the shelf. But let's say I didn't have that box yet. I would put that either in a pile on the shelf or in a baggie on the shelf until I figured out which container would be the best one for it, okay? And this allows me to, oh, well, I think it's gonna go right here by my desk, but what if it makes more sense on the bookcase over there? And then I can move the whole thing around as I go through the spots. So I hope that helps, and I will go more in depth on this when I talk more about the keep stuff and that theory. But I've done the sorting, I've done the purging, I think it's gonna go here. I need to set it there for a while I continue the rest of the room. And if I find other things that match it, it now has a place to join this grouping. There's that temporary part during the process where some things are gonna be in flux. They're gonna move around from place to place to place until you figure out the exact best place to put them. All right, so that's the keeping. And then, as I was saying, as you determine where you're going to keep things, the systematizing comes in. That is when you think a little bit deeper. How are you going to use this? Where am I going to use this? Is this the best place for it? How am I going to know when to replace things in this grouping? How am I going to decide what else needs to go with this grouping? All those things are part of the systematize situation and step of getting organized. This is where most people never get to. All they do is sort and purge and rearrange. They never get to this part of, how am I going to use it? So that's the next step you're going to want to work on. And that's where sometimes the motivation starts lagging, because you're just sorting and rearranging and then it doesn't seem like it's getting better. It's because you're not doing the systematizing part of it. How are you going to replace the chips in your pantry? Are you going to go to the store? Are you going to write it on a list? Are you going to put it on your phone? Are you going to take a photo? What are you going to do to clue yourself in that you have to replace the thing or use the thing by a certain date and time? And what is that situation? So that's actually the fun part for me, is the systematizing. Not everyone likes that part, but thinking it through. And because you already have a plan, you know why you're getting organized in the first place, it makes the systematizing of things much easier. So for me, part of the cards was to realize that I didn't want to take up as much space as it would take to have very specific cards for very specific holidays. So I buy very generic, pretty cards that are blank, and I use those. And that way I have several different styles all in one box. They all fit in the same amount of space and they can be used for any occasion. So that was my systematizing thing. When I get down to 3 or 4 cards, I put it on my list, and the next time I'm at the office supply store, I pick up another round of blank pretty cards. That's how it's systematized. There's a whole thought process involved. Okay, so the last part is the making it beautiful. And that is when you containerize. That's when you arrange the decor part. And that is when you go find the perfect container for the items you are storing. And often the perfect container is no container. But if you're going to have a container, and I highly recommend them when you are trying to corral things that flow out into the drawer or flow or flop over on the shelf, you want to have some sort of container. And make it pretty and make it useful and not too difficult to open the lid on. That's the one thing. And just exactly the right size. All right. So I hope that's a good overview. That's, once you have that container, then you are using the systems that you have set up with the items that are just right for the job and are your favorite versions for keeping. And then you are able to continue on with your life, using your things, and very rarely needing to actually do a major reorganization. There's adjustments, and as things change in your life, you may bring in new items or take out old items, but the system of how you use things and what goes on in a given room stays relatively stable from here on out, once you have done all of these steps. So again, if you would like to get more information and go in depth before I get there, you can go to morethanorganized.net. Otherwise, join me here on Mondays and I will go over each step a little more in depth over the next few weeks, so you know exactly what you're going to be doing as you get organized. Thanks for dropping by.